Our facilitator today is Nora Bergman. Nora is a law firm coach and author and has been a certified Atticus Practice Advisor since 2006. As a licensed attorney since 1992, Nora brings a deep understanding of the practice and business of law to her work with lawyers, law firms, and bar associations across the country. She's practiced as an employment law attorney and certified mediator and has served as an adjunct professor at both Stetson University College of Law and the University of South Florida. Nora is a graduate of Villanova University's Lean Six Sigma program and teaches a course on Lean for Lawyers at Solo Practice University. She's also the author of 50 Lessons for Lawyers, Earn More, Stress Less, Be Awesome, and 50 Lessons for Women Lawyers from Women Lawyers, both available on Amazon.com. So Nora, with that, I'll go ahead and turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you so much, Susan, and welcome everybody to this webinar, which I am very, very excited and proud to be a part of, and really excited to be presenting with the two women that are with me this afternoon. So I'd like to first introduce my two co-presenters and give you just the roadmap for this webinar. So what we're going to do is essentially three little mini webinars in one, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. So I'm going to speak for a little bit, and then our next panelist, Nikki Black, is going to speak for a little bit. I've got Nikki's bio up there. I'm not going to read that to you. I'm going to let you look at it and you can read it, but I just want to highlight some of the things that I'd like you to know about Nikki. Nikki, first of all, is a published author of a couple of books, not only 2 books, but actually several books. Probably the most well-known for my perspective is Cloud Computing for Lawyers, which she wrote in 2012, and Social Media for Lawyers, The Next Frontier, which she wrote in 2010. So very much a forward-thinking thought leader in the area of tech and how lawyers can leverage tech in their practices. She has literally written hundreds of articles for a variety of publications, from the ABA Journal to all types of legal publications. She writes for Above the Law and other online legal blogs. She is currently the legal technology evangelist at MyCase and writes prolifically for the MyCase blog as well. Nikki and Ivy Gray, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment, both of these women were contributors to my book that Susan just mentioned, 50 Lessons for Women Lawyers from Women Lawyers. Nikki wrote lesson number 6, You Decide What It Means to Be Successful. And Nikki's lesson, like Ivy's lesson, is relevant not only to women lawyers, but to any lawyer, regardless of where you are in your practice, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whatever, however you come to the practice of law. You can follow Nikki on Twitter. She has a fantastic Twitter feed, just as Ivy does. You can follow her at Nikki Black, N-I-K-I Black, on Twitter. And she's going to be talking to us about legal tech tools that we can use. Our next presenter is Ivy Gray. Ivy is currently the Director of Business Strategy for WordRake, and she is the creator of the American Legal Style for PerfectIt. Also a thought leader in legal tech with a very, very robust Twitter account. She's a fun person to follow on Twitter, and you can follow her at Ivy B. Gray, that's G-R-E-Y, on Twitter. Ivy, before becoming a legal tech expert and shifting her focus of her career to legal tech, she practiced for 10 years as a bankruptcy attorney. She is licensed in New York and other states. And before making that transition to where she is now as a legal tech expert, she was named a rising star in the New York metro area for 5 consecutive years. I think that is incredibly impressive. Ivy, as I mentioned, like Nikki, also contributed to the book, 50 Lessons for Women Lawyers from Women Lawyers, Lesson 19, Choose Your Own Adventure, Decisions, Pivots, and Possibilities. And like Nikki's lesson, it is relevant to any lawyer, anywhere. So with that, I am going to kind of get started here with my part of this presentation. As I mentioned, we're going to do 3 mini webinars, if you will, which focus on 3 strategies for a successful remote workplace. The first strategy is to make it official by creating and implementing a clear policy. That's what I'm going to be speaking about in just a moment. Nikki is going to speak to the right tools. What are the right tools now to help you create a virtual office for your practice and how to use them? And then finally, Ivy is going to talk about the perfect formula for effective teamwork in a virtual environment, which is so incredibly critical. I know that most lawyers, we kind of want to focus on the nuts and bolts, the tech side of things. But if you don't have the people side of the equation in a virtual or remote workplace down right, then it doesn't matter what tech you use, because it's not going to be, your team is not going to be as effective as they could be if you have them working together using the right formula for teamwork. So let's start first by talking a little bit about why it is really important to make your remote workplace policy official. And so right now we are in this kind of crazy time where so much of the country is under a stay-at-home order. We're all working virtually right now. And while the requirement that we work virtually may be temporary, I feel pretty strongly, and I'd love to hear as Ivy and Nikki speak how they feel about this. I think that this change to virtual work is going to be a lasting change in the practice and the industry of law. Working virtually is something that is an effective way to work. However, many law firms and lawyers have resisted it. But the truth is, if you think about what we're doing now, the ability to work virtually, to work remotely, think of it as being in place now and into the future, because there are many benefits that we can get from it. So why does remote work? Why does working remotely work? Well, it benefits both employees and employers, because for employees, there's less stress, generally speaking. And there have actually been studies on remote workplace productivity that show that people who have the capability and the flexibility to work remotely and not literally be in the office can be far more productive than people that are actually sitting in the office and working. Remote work and the ability to work virtually can also foster a culture that can benefit your clients, because your team is really more flexible, more responsive to your clients' needs than they were if they were sitting behind their desk in an office. There's another really important reason why working remotely is important to your law firm. People want this option. They want to be able to work remotely. With respect to millennials in particular, an ABA study has told us that by the end of this decade, millennials will make up 75% of all law firm staff. Okay? And the other research that you're seeing here is research done by Deloitte, which found that 75% of millennials say they want to work from home or a work remote policy. So that being said, it's not just millennials that want the flexibility to work virtually or work at home. I'm going to quote a little bit of Gallup research here. Gallup has done a ton of research on employee engagement and looking out into the future, what people want from their jobs. And Gallup has found that 53% of all employees, not just millennials, want a role that allows them to have greater work-life balance and better personal well-being. This is important to everybody, particularly important to millennials. And as part of that, employees view the ability to work virtually as a real plus. Further, Gallup goes on to say that firms and employers that have looked at this study, looked at this research, have found that 51% of employees say they would switch jobs to a job that allows them flex time. 51%. So if you are thinking in terms of what we're going through now as just being a temporary thing, I would encourage you to embrace, although embracing is probably not a word we should even be using these days, but embrace the concept going out into the future. Don't look at this as just a temporary way of work, but think about how you can use your ability to create that virtual workplace as a driver to draw the best and the brightest to your firm when we're on the other side of this, because the best and the brightest staff, the best and the brightest attorneys want that capability. So I think it's going to be hard to turn the clock back. I'm going to cite one more study to you real quickly before we talk a little bit about policy itself and what you want to have in your policy. Another study by PwC Global, which is a consulting firm, found that, quote, millennials do not believe that productivity should be measured by the number of hours worked at the office, but by the output of the work performed. They view the work as a thing and not a place. I love that quote because it just strikes me as so interesting. And isn't it true? And especially for law firms, if you can support your people and your lawyers and your staff and give them the ability and the flexibility that they need to work in a way that they want to work, they are going to be more productive in the long term. So I'll get off my soapbox about this being just a temporary thing and really want to encourage you to embrace the idea of working virtually as a long-term strategy for your law firm. So what are some of the essentials that you want to have in a remote workplace policy? You want to make sure that it meets all FLSA requirements and regulations with respect to both non-exempt employees and exempt employees. You want to address the work environment, the home work environment, or the outside of the office work environment. Security and confidentiality are very important in a policy. You want to be able to address workplace injuries. If you are injured in the home, is that a workers' compensation injury or not? You want to address the intellectual property rights of your firm over work that is conducted at home, and also addressing expenses. So I know that there are a lot of firms now who allow their employees to work virtually, but for many of those firms, it is just kind of an ad hoc thing with no real policy in place to cover it, nothing written, just an understanding. A good friend of mine has been working virtually from home for the law firm that she works for over 12 years. And when all of this hit, I said, does your firm have a policy around working at home? And she's like, no, we've never really done that. We just work at home, and everybody understands what the rules are. And while that may have worked in the past, I would encourage you to think very, very differently as we go forward. So when I say make it official, in terms of the workplace policy, I want to encourage you to actually have a plan in place, a policy in place that covers not only the bullets that I just discussed, but a variety of other areas. So here is what you're seeing as a sample workplace policy that we have available for you. It's going to be downloadable to you, I think, in both a PDF and in a Word document so that you can customize it however you choose. This particular sample contains components that may or may not be right for your law firm. So we want to encourage you to create a policy that is going to fit your firm's needs and then implement it firm-wide. And you'll have it in place, and even after we are through what we're going through right now, it'll be there for your staff and your employees. And I feel very strongly that it will not only help them be more productive, but it's going to give you leverage that other firms that are not allowing virtual work to continue after this lockdown, it's going to give you more leverage over them. One other study that I'll quote before I pass it off to Nikki to talk about the right tools that you need to do this is that law firms are lagging behind other businesses in allowing their employees to work virtually. That's not a surprise because typically law firms are not early adopters to new ideas and new things and new technology. Fewer than 50% of law firms, according again to a Gallup study recently, I think it came out in 2016, fewer than 50% of law firms permitted virtual work or remote work. So if you can position yourself in the minority and be able to attract people that want this, it's going to be super plus for you in terms of recruiting as we go forward. So as I said, this policy in PDF and in Word, so you can customize it. It's going to be available to you for download. And with that, I am going to hand things over to Nikki Black, who's going to talk to us about the 7 tech tools that you need for your virtual office.
Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to going over this with you. I do want to note at the outset that my portion of the presentation is based on an ABA journal article that I wrote last month called 7 Tech Tools for the Virtual Office or something along those lines. So if you Google that, you can find that article. And what that article does is it goes into each of these different categories of tech tools I'm going to be talking about and links to a prior article that I wrote on that specific tech tool. So I've been writing for the ABA journal for 2 years now on different types of legal software tools. And for this particular article, I pulled all of the ones together that are specifically the most useful for remote work and sort of rounded them up in that article. So it might be helpful for you just to have that article as a roadmap while I'm going through this, but also just to have it available to you afterwards so that you can go through and research the specific tools and read the full article on each tool. That being said, the only other thing I wanted to say before I went into this was that I'm going to be covering the ethical issues for each category of these. For the vast majority of them, it's going to be the same advice, which is that because the vast majority of these tools are cloud-based, that you have an ethical obligation when any third party has access to your law firm's confidential data to exercise reasonable care to ensure that the confidential information remains confidential and is securely protected. So for all of these different categories of tools, because they're all cloud-based, that general rule is always going to apply. And so I'm going to go over that right now up front, a little bit more in depth, and then just mention it offhand as I approach each tool. And only for certain tools where there's actually some additional ethical rules will I go into the specific ethical rules for that tool. So generally speaking, when you your goal when you have to exercise reasonable care in choosing technologies is one of them is you have to thoroughly vet the provider. You have to ascertain how long their provider's been around, have they been acquired, or have they received investments? So to show that they're financially stable. Where are they located? You also want to understand who owns the company. Are they private or public? And that helps you understand that, and a lot of these companies have been around since 2008. My case and a bunch of its competitors have been around for 8 to 10 years now. So most of the cloud practice management companies are fairly stable at this point, and some of them are quite stable. And then there are other tools that are more recent, and the programs or the companies are newer. So you really need to research them. You also need to understand how they protect your data. If it's encrypted, is it encrypted in transit and at rest? You need to understand backup policies. How do they back up your data? Is there geo-redundancy? Cloud computing means that your data is stored on servers owned by a third party. And you want to make sure that they have multiple servers on different coast or different geographical regions, so that share information often and frequently, so that if one of those servers goes down, the other one has a very recent database that has all of your firm's information that's very within the last hour, or preferably 5 or 10 minutes, so that you don't lose all of your law firm's data. You want to understand who has access to it. You want to know which employees can access it, both the physical servers themselves and also the data stored on the servers, and under what circumstances will they actually access that information. And you need to understand encryption. So generally speaking, for most lawyers, the data that you're handling is confidential, but it's not particularly sensitive, meaning that for most lawyers, most of the information you deal with, very few people would want to actually access it. So if you're representing someone on a petty larceny, very few people want to break into your system to get that. If you're representing a Chinese dissident, if you're representing a celebrity in a divorce, if you're handling someone charged with terrorism, representing them in a criminal defense matter at the federal level, in those cases, it's possible that someone may want to actually access that information for political reasons or in order to make money from that information. And in that case, it is particularly sensitive. And you have to decide in your area of practice when it is that you're handling that particularly sensitive information. And when you're dealing with law firm communications, which is a lot of what I'm going to go into here, the ABA issued opinion 477 in May of 2017 and said that up until now, we've always said that email is sufficient, even though it's unencrypted and it's like sending a postcard through the mail written in pencil. But because technology has changed, when you do handle particularly sensitive information, you may not want to use unencrypted email and you want to find other more secure encrypted ways to communicate. You have to make that decision on a case-by-case basis. Or else the other option is to just use a more encrypted form of communication all the time. That's what I recommend that you do, which would be encrypted email or encrypted portals that are available in law practice management systems or other types of practice management, other types of legal software tools. So those are just some of the things that you need to consider, generally speaking, when it comes to using cloud technology. You also want to understand, the last thing I want to go over is integrations, because you want to understand what tools are actually available in the software and the integrations. And I'll actually go into that a little more when I talk about the law practice management section, because that doesn't apply to a lot of the others. So I'll set that aside for now and come back to it. Now I'm going to start with each of the different tools and the categories that we're going to go over. And like I said, I'm only going to cover the ethical issues if they are above and beyond what I just discussed with you. But those ethical issues apply to all of the tools I'm going to be talking, because they're all cloud-based. Why are they all cloud-based? Because as lawyers, because when you're working remotely, you can remote accessing, but that's particularly clunky. Cloud-based tools are much more suitable for remote work. You just have to log in to the using an internet connection, and you have access to all of your firm's information. So first, let's talk about video conferencing. This one is, I think, key pain point for lawyers with all the remote work that we're doing now. And when it comes to video conferencing, there are a lot of people are using Zoom, and I'm going to talk about Zoom. I've worked remotely since 2005. I've worked from home, and I've worked remotely for Appfolio, my case's parent company, since 2012. So I've been doing this a long time, and I've used both GoToMeeting, which is the company that owns the webinar software that this webinar is being hosted on, and also Zoom and for video conferencing. And Zoom is significantly easier to use. It does have some security issues that I'll talk about in a moment, but the nice thing about video conferencing, especially when you're working remotely, is you can see the people you're talking to, whether it's your employees, colleagues, clients. You can have one-on-one conversations and you can see them. But obviously you need to consider the security issues. And there are some unique security issues to think about when it comes to video conferencing. And if you've seen any headlines lately, you know that Zoom has been in the news a lot because of its some of the security issues. I would suggest, and a couple of others in the legal tech space have suggested the same thing, that for most lawyers, those security issues are not problematic. And this is why. I refer to ABA Formal Opinion 477, which talks about particularly sensitive information. For most lawyers, you do not need, ethical obligations don't require encrypted communication, but encrypted communication is preferable. But the primary issue with video conferencing is whether Zoom used to say they were end-to-end encrypted, meaning that it was encrypted end-to-end and nobody could access it except for the people that had were in on the conference. But it turns out that Zoom was incorrect about that, or were a little deceptive about that. Zoom can access that information. A Zoom employee can. So it's not end-to-end encrypted. It is instead transport encryption, meaning it's encrypted while it's being sent over the internet. For most lawyers, transport encryption is sufficient, because unless you are a lawyer that has that particularly sensitive information, or you're concerned that the government may issue a FISA warrant, which is something some criminal defense lawyers have concerns about. In that case, you want to hold the encryption key when it's at rest, so that the government has to come to you, and the internet company or the service provider cannot provide that information to the government without your knowledge. In that situation where you have that particularly sensitive information, you want to hold that encryption key. But in most cases, lawyers don't need to hold that encryption key, because there aren't going to be FISA warrants served on their data, and no one's going to want to try to get their data from the internet provider or otherwise hack into it. And in that situation, you can just use transport encryption. End-to-end encryption is clearly more secure, but most lawyers don't need that additional layer of security. So unless you need that additional layer of security where you want to make sure that you hold that encryption key, you can use transport encryption, which is used by Skype and Google Hangouts and many other common tools, including Zoom. There are end-to-end encryption options though. So let's talk about the standard transport encryption video conferencing options include Google Hangouts, Slack, and Google Hangouts is part of Gmail. And Slack, if you use Slack for your firm's internal communications, it also has video conferencing built in. And Zoom is a great tool. It's user-friendly. It's super popular because it is so user-friendly. And that is also standard transport encryption, as we've now learned. End-to-end video conferencing, if you feel like you need to have that encrypted at rest requirement, there's WebEx and GoToMeeting, both of which are very robust and include a host of features. And if you use Outlook, you can use Skype for Business, and that also has the extra layer of encryption built into it. And then if for just secure messaging, mostly for one-on-one video chats, Signal and WhatsApp are apps for your iOS that are free, and they also have some web interfaces, but you can also consider using those. And then there's one legal specific video conferencing tool you might want to look at. It's called Legaler, L-E-G-A-L-E-R, and Legaler is right now offering free access to lawyers. So you might want to look at that as well because of the COVID situation. I can't recall how long the free access lasts for. But for specific price points, if you look at my ABA Journal article, it'll take you to this video conferencing article, and you can take a look at that. Then I wanted to go into VoIP systems. So let's talk about VoIP systems. VoIP is Voice over Internet Protocol. And that is a particular pain point for lawyers right now because oftentimes they have landlines with telephone systems that allow them to transfer calls everywhere within the office, hold conference calls. But once you're out of the office, that doesn't do much good for you. It doesn't do you much good because suddenly your landline is inaccessible to you. So Voice over Internet Protocol is a great way to make it so that you can work remotely, have access to your phone lines, and easily send messages and voicemail messages to people and make them accessible, or transfer calls to people who are working remotely. Sometimes it just uses the internet, and other times it uses hardware and software. So sometimes you're going to have some hardware that you install somewhere. I would suggest that when everyone's working remotely, you're better off with just the software versions. And with VoIP systems, you can typically make and receive unlimited phone calls, including international calls in many cases, conduct conference calls, forward calls to your mobile or home phone, and receive and store messages in different formats, manage calls on the go, send and receive faxes, and much more. So there are a ton of options. Google Voice is the one that many lawyers will just use individually. I wouldn't recommend that for a firm because it's not particularly robust. But for some more robust options that are not free, Google Voice is free depending on the level you choose. There's Ring Central, which is probably the most well-known VoIP provider, and it has multiple different pricing tiers. Another option is Nextiva, and Uma is another one to consider. Uma has some hardware, so you might want to look at Ring Central or Nextiva. They all have all different pricing plans. And like I said, they make it so, and some of them even have some built-in online collaboration tools, video conferencing, and some integrations with Microsoft, Google, and Box so that you can store the different types of file types that have been received through it. So, you know, they have a lot of different options when it comes to VoIP, and it's definitely something to look into right now because that's a big pain point for a lot of law firms. The next thing, next slide, that I wanted to talk about is law practice management software. And just as a caveat before I start, I've been employed with by MyCase, which offers law practice management software since 2012. My cloud book that Nora referred to came out prior to my employment with MyCase. I've been writing about the cloud and advocating the use of the cloud for a long time now. And my opinions about the use of the cloud have not changed since I was hired by MyCase. And I'm not here to sell you MyCase. I'm here to talk to you about law practice management software, and some of our competitors might be a better fit for you. You really just need to research your options, understand the provider, understand your options, as I'll talk about in a minute, and choose the one that is the best fit for your law firm. One thing I do want to talk about in terms of your ethical obligations when you choose law practice management software is You do need to read the SLA agreement, the service level agreement, carefully, and have for any time you use cloud-based tools. And make sure you understand the agreement between you and the cloud provider. And just a quick story in terms of the importance of reading agreements and understanding the language used therein. I have an 18-year-old kid who, when she was 8 years old, was playing soccer, and I use the term playing loosely. She was running around on the field, not really paying much attention to anything as far as I could tell, certainly not the ball. But then at one point she ran up to me and she said, "Mom, this is really funny. There's a sticker on the goalpost and it says, you can't climb on it because injury or serious death could occur. Injury or serious death," is what she said to me. And she laughed and she said, "That doesn't make any sense, Mom," and ran away. And I was curious and I walked up to the goalpost and read the little disclaimer sticker, and sure enough, it said injury or serious death. And she was right, it didn't make any sense. And I was really proud that even though it looked like she wasn't doing a lot out there, that she was carefully reading legal disclaimers. And I would suggest that you do the same. Read the SLA agreement, read read the disclaimers, make sure you understand how they're handling your data. And also make sure that you understand the provider. Like I'd mentioned before, their financial stability, how long they've been around. And when it comes to practice management systems, make sure you understand, you also have to vet the integration partners, because they are going to have access to your law practice management system and all of its data. And you have an obligation to, in general, most jurisdictions say vet cloud computing providers every year or so to make sure that you understand that they're not handling your data any differently than they said they were before. So if you have a bunch of integrations going into your cloud practice management system, you're going to have to vet those providers every year to make sure that they are continuing to do that. So the more integrations there are, the more vetting you're going to have to do on an annual basis. You also want to understand the pricing point for access to those integrations, because some software programs work in different ways in terms of practice management. Some have most of the features built into the software. Others offer more flexibility and customization by allowing you to have all these integrations into the software. And others take a blended approach that have a built-in features and some integrations. One thing to keep in mind when you research all of this is the price. All software has a base price, but some offer tiered pricing with increasingly more features included in the higher tiers. And integrations are often included in those higher tiers. And sometimes you have to pay extra for the integration tools and the law practice management software if it's not built into the software. Sometimes you have to pay a higher subscription cost to access all of those different features. So it's important to understand the pricing and identify at the front what your top problems are when you're trying to choose law practice management software, so that you can then choose the platform that works the best for you. Now, why is law practice management software? I think especially right now, when everyone's working remotely, it's key. I would suggest that rather than getting a document management platform, getting tasks and to-dos, using a calendar system somewhere else, right now when you need all your data accessible in one place because of the pain points you're experiencing from going remote so quickly, law practice management software may be a great way for you to do that for your firm, especially since it seems like this shelter in place thing is going to be going on a lot longer than many of us initially expected. And what you're going to find in practice management software is document management. There's going to be ability to assign tasks and to-dos. There's going to be calendar management features, time tracking tools, so you can track your time as you're billing it. Legal billing features that allow you to invoice and your clients, and payment processing that allows your clients to pay you once they receive that invoice using a credit card or their debit card. There's also secure communication and collaboration features, which I talked about previously in terms of your ethical obligations. These communications features not only ethical because they're encrypted, but they also make it a lot easier for everyone to be on the same page in your law firm. Because you're using these communication portals, you're able to take notes on the cases that everybody can see. You can communicate with your clients in one place. Some of these tools have e-signature tools built in, or you can integrate e-signature tools into them, which have become increasingly important now that there are virtual notaries and virtual signing, and you need to get your engagement letters signed ahead of time. They also have lead management tools built in to help you track and manage your leads as they come in. So that's practice management software, but I think that you'll find that it may be a way for you to get everybody all on the same page, working remotely with everything centralized in one location. I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is online fax services. So with online fax services, instead of having your hardware fax machine, you can fax across using the internet. These have been around for a decade, but a lot of lawyers aren't really aware of this. eFax was the first one. Obviously, you have to vet the company, as I mentioned before, because it is cloud-based software. But essentially what happens is, instead of using traditional fax machines, you send and receive documents in digital form. Depending on the service, they can be sent and received via an email, an online portal, or a smartphone app. And you do have to get your documents in digital form. I'm going to talk about scanners momentarily. So you scan your documents, convert into a digital document, then you use the eFax service to fax your faxes to someone else. And if they have a hard fax machine, like a actual fax machine, it'll just come out of the fax machine like a normal fax, if that's how they want to receive it, or they'll receive it as an email, depending on how they're receiving their faxes. So, and one thing to keep in mind when you choose them is some providers will allow you to transfer your current fax number into the service for free or for a fee. But if you do that and then you cancel their service, they won't necessarily return the fax number to you. So you want to ask them that question up front and make sure you've clarified that piece of the puzzle. In case you want to leave the fax provider, you'll lose your number. So there are a number of providers, and if you go and look at my article on eFax from the ABA Journal on fax, virtual fax machines, you'll see that there are all the pricing points. But there's eFax, which is the one that's been around the longest. MetroFax is another one that's very popular with lawyers. MyFax is another affordable option. Nextiva, SRS Fax, and SmartFax. And some of them also include some voice over internet VoIP providers, like I just discussed, also include eFax in them as well. Next up is scanning tools. Now that you are working remote, and especially if you're going to use practice management software, eFax, you're going to want to have digital documents. And scanning tools are how you get your documents digitized. There are the Fujitsu ScanSnap for most lawyers, especially solo and small firm lawyers, is a super popular option because it's fairly small, it's affordable, and depending on which one you choose, it can scan up to 25 color pages a minute or 50 color pages per minute. There's the Fujitsu ScanSnap IX500 and the Fujitsu 550-530 C2 scanner, which the C2 scanner has 50 color pages a minute. The IX500 scans up to 25 a minute, but that's one of the most popular options across the board for lawyers, especially in solo and small firms. And I would suggest that you just buy one for each person that's going to need to be scanning stuff, and have it at their remote office, at their home office, so that they can easily scan information into the internet, into your document management or law practice management software, so that you can access it easily and use those, share those documents. If you travel often, you might want a mobile scanner. I feel like that's a little bit less relevant right now because we're not moving around much, but there's Brother ADS 1250W. You can carry the scanner in your car and just scan documents in the car when you leave the courthouse, for example. Fujitsu also has the ScanSnap S300i or 1300i, which is a little more compact and could be used as a mobile scanner. You can also use your smartphone or tablet to scan documents using different apps, and those, in that case, it's just a few pages at a time, but Scanner Pro, Genius Scan, or Turbo Scan are really affordable options. So those are great tools now that you are working remotely. Number 6, next slide, is collaborative word processing tools. Also super useful now that you're working remotely. This could oftentimes be a pain point for you. With collaborative word processing tools, you do need to vet them. Like I said, vet the providers. But when you have them, what it means is that you can create tools that are stored in the cloud that anyone else from your law firm can access, and you can collaborate on those documents together, and you can make comments on them, you can update and revise them, you can collaborate on them in real time, and then you can let people know when it's time to print them out and send them, or fax them, or whatever the case may be. But oftentimes you may sometimes want to use, I write a lot, I still prefer to use Pages on my Mac, which is the software that is not in the cloud, because it's a little more robust, and then I'll just email it, or you can convert it into a Google Docs, for example. You can upload it into that and then collaborate. But I like to write my stuff actually on my computer, not in the cloud, using the software installed on my computer. But it's up to you. It's a personal choice. There are a couple different options. There's Microsoft Office 365, which is Microsoft's online office suite. And that includes Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Apple. If you're in the Apple ecosystem, they have Pages in iCloud, and you can use that, but you'll have to pay for additional storage over a certain level. Google Docs is great if you already use Gmail. This is what my company uses for, we have G Suite for our email, and we use Google Docs for all of our collaborative stuff. So whenever I need to work on things with my colleagues, I will do that in Google Docs, not on Pages. When I need to submit articles, I will write those usually in on my computer using Pages. Zoho Writer is a great option for online word processing, Apache OpenOffice, and LibreOffice. Those are a bunch of different options. And again, if you go to my word processing article, you can see the specifics and price points with links to each of these tools. And last but not least, speech-to-text dictation. So this is a great tool. So if you need to dictate quickly, it essentially allows you to speak into your computer or your smartphone, and as you speak, the text appears as you speak. So you don't have to do the whole back and forth with your secretary or legal admin to get that the document dictated and then typed. It uses voice recognition technology. And just in terms of the, very quickly with the ethical issues with this, I would suggest some people are concerned about your data being sent to the servers of the cloud computing company to be processed rather than being processed by your computer itself. I would suggest that given that email is sufficient for lawyers, even though it's completely unencrypted, that alone would indicate that it's okay for them to process it on their cloud service, especially when they tell you that they're only using it to improve their product. And I would also refer you to, in 2008, the New York State Bar issued Ethics Opinion 820, and that gave lawyers the blessing to use Gmail, the free version, with ads that are popped up based on the text in the email. And their rationale was that Gmail scans the email only for that purpose, and it's a computer that scans it to serve up better ads, and because it's just the computer scanning it, that it's okay. And I would suggest the same thing applies with the processing of your voice for this voice to text transcription. There are a bunch of different options available, and sometimes you can just have it processed by your computer instead. It's not as accurate oftentimes when you do it that way. There are a number of different options. They are your iOS and Android devices both will include this feature. Macs and PCs also have built-in voice recognition tools. Dragon speech recognition has always been one of the best tools for this, and they have a bunch of different options as well. And if you're looking for a more robust option for a larger firm, Big Hands, WinScribe, or Philips might be a good fit. And again, if you go to my ABA Journal article on voice to text transcription, you will have links to all these options, and you can learn the specifics in terms of pricing and what their features are. So there you have it. Those are some of the tools I'd recommend you consider. And with that, I'll hand things over to Ivy.
And this is Nora. Thank you. That was a lot of information, Nikki. Greatly appreciate it. And yeah, I would encourage everybody on the webinar to go check out Nikki's article in the ABA Journal and the links therein. And with that, Ivy.
All right, we're going to take a hard left turn and start talking about the people part. I've worked 100% remotely for the past 5 years as a lawyer and a legal tech creator. The other slide, go back. Before that, I ran several arts nonprofits with 100% remote teams of volunteers. So I've got 13 years of experience with remote teams. And the most important thing that I've learned is that your key ingredient is your people, not the tech, not some innovative idea, your people. So next slide. If you've never worked remotely, chances are you want someone to tell you how to do it using a straightforward plan. You'll copy it, then you'll be on your merry way. But remote work isn't that straightforward. There is no perfect formula. So instead, I'd like to provide you with some approaches to help you get through this with your relationships intact and your clients' needs met. Next slide. There are generally 3 types of people who work from home. Type 1, these are the people with military-grade rigidity and focus. They say, make a schedule, start at the same time every day, have a ritual, et cetera, et cetera. All of their advice is really designed to mimic the rigidity of the office work structure. Then there's type 2. These are the people who are hopeful and they don't really have a plan. Everything is flexible. Lots of stuff is chaotic. And despite the lack of evidence structure, they're still somehow getting everything done. And then there's another type. It's a mix between the two. And I honestly think this describes most people. The truth is that how much you can vary your day really depends on who else is relying on you to be doing something at or by a certain time. But beyond that, you can be rigid one day and flexible another, or rigid part of your day and flexible the rest. Next, I think it's important to state up front that you can succeed without following a rigid schedule. I don't have a rigid schedule, and I've managed to build entirely new technology and have a law practice. For some people, the rigidity is good. For others, a set schedule is just added pressure during uncertain times, and you beat yourself up if you aren't productive when your schedule says you should be. The real goal of my talk is to give you tools to help you protect your mental health, be productive, and establish times when you're not working. But here's the thing. Remote work is not really about magic life hacks or schedules or technology. It's mostly about trust, respect, and communication. Next. So if you're part of a team, imagine a relay race. I like to use this analogy because when I was at Davis Wright Tremaine, a large law firm in Portland, I was part of the firm's speedwalking team. Every year we came together in this 200-mile endurance race called Hood to Coast. It was an intense, more than 24-hour relay race. We'd each walk various legs of the course, switching off every 3 to 10 miles. The team included lawyers, paralegals, legal secretaries, and other staff. It didn't matter who you were at the firm once you got out onto the course. Everybody had their role to play, and over our years of racing together, we figured out that the best division of the course and the best ways to support each other. We also trusted each other to do the work off the course so that we'd be the most successful team racing on the course. So what does this have to do with remote working? Well, like my speedwalking team at DWT, when you're working remotely with a team, you can go to the next slide, Nora, analyze and learn the course, divide labor based on skills and work to be done, support each other so we can have strong performance on the course, execute a solid, well-timed handoff, and then repeat the process again and again until we reach the finish line. And for us, that finish line was somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. So I urge you to take the same approach with your remote team. The most important part is the handoff. If you fumble it, you'll lose valuable time. Planning and executing the perfect handoff requires that you understand your workflow. There's no easy way to do this. You'll have to spend a few hours online talking in real time, discussing projects to be completed, and explaining how each piece of the project gets accomplished. Screen share, sketch it out, pass control back and forth so each contributor can show where important information is kept, and demonstrate a few key elements of how that piece of work is done. Discuss how long it takes to complete tasks and when the best time is to do it. Trust me, a lot of effort goes into legal work that you don't realize is getting done. It seems invisible to you. And that was fine when you could walk down the hall to interrupt someone with an emergency, but that doesn't work so well when you're working remotely and largely asynchronously. So get into the details, uncover your assumptions and the invisible work. But when you break, assume that everyone can and will do their job. Next slide. This is where it's important to be a team and act like one. Let everyone cover their ground in their own way. It doesn't matter whether your walk is from the Ministry of Silly Walks from Monty Python or the impossibly graceful relay race from the Olympics. In a relay, some people are faster and some people are slower, but the handoff points are the same place in the track regardless of your speed. And that's what we're all focused on. This is a team event, and your team doesn't cross the finish line until the last person does. You all finish together, you win or lose together. Next. Now here's the hardest part for most lawyers. You must actually pass the baton. Don't fumble the handoff. Place it firmly in the hand of your colleague. Don't just throw the baton at your colleague without waiting to see whether they catch it and continue. But you also don't hold on to the baton and run along with them until they reach the finish line. This is especially bad if you've got two different walks. You must hand off the baton and actually let go. Next. It's easy to let go when you've planned how your team will execute the course. When you work remotely, you'll suddenly realize how much work you got done when you were in the communal kitchen or in the hallway and didn't realize you were working. Those opportunities aren't available now. So you must set clear expectations of how work will get done, and you must set boundaries. If you're always available, you'll never get to focus on your own work. The same is true for your team. Plan your handoffs. Who will be working on the document next? What must they do? What must they know? And if anything changes, communicate that to your colleagues. This can be essential information about the project, like a key deliverable or a deadline. It can also be anything essential about you. Is today a meltdown day for you or your child? And if so, then this document won't get written until tonight. So tell your colleagues. You'll also need a backup plan. Where is the backup document if yours gets corrupted? Who will take over if one of you gets sick? How do they find the information? Next. Most people approach work, though, like a solo marathon, not a relay. You plan to cover all your work yourself, all your ground yourself, and perhaps you view your support staff like they're the mere water boys stepping up to assist you while you're on the course. They're support players in your marathon, and you expect them to be ready when you pass them. But that doesn't work here. There are no minor players. Everyone matters in the remote workforce. This is a relay, and that means that you can also reimagine how you work and when you work. With homeschooling and everything else, it's time to let go of the expectation that everyone will work the same hours. So consider working in shifts. Set some core hours for when you'll all be online together and readily available, then let the rest go. About 4 hours on most days is a good block of time to have as core hours. This will free other people up to work their most productive hours and allow for other life things to happen. When you let go of the artificial workday, the concept of a day can take on new meaning. Your clients can actually get 20 to 24 hours of service out of a day, not 8 or 10. It's great if you have a night owl on your team. For me as the night owl, I knew that I could accomplish twice as much between 4 p.m. and 4 a.m. as I would if it were the other way around. Working in shifts was perfect for me and for the clients. I know this seems weird, but it really does work. Think back to the last time you rushed to the office and then you waited around all day, unable to start the next project because the person wasn't ready to hand it off. That's a recipe for burnout, and it's even worse in these times when you're working from home and everything is uncertain. So you don't need to be as extreme as I am. Maybe your handoff is at midnight, but think of the people who want to get up early to begin work before they start homeschooling their children. Say they work from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. That's a great time to get things done. And then that person can pass on the project for the person who does want to start work at 9, and so on. In these circumstances, you're working asynchronously, but it's a really efficient relay race. And you're getting 24 hours of time out of day, and nothing is wasted. Next. So the reality is, at some point, you're going to be running late. Dealing with this is important if someone's waiting for the handoff. Remember that with remote work, your team can't see you. They can't read the signals to know that you're stressed out and running late. So you've got to communicate your status and what you're working on. Model the behavior that you want if you're the team leader. Check in frequently and offer status reports. Don't wait until someone asks. If you need more time, tell the person waiting for the handoff. Don't wait until you're already late. But this also works in the other direction. If you're the one waiting for the handoff, but you know that you're not actually going to start working on your portion of the project for a few more hours or days, tell the person working on the leg immediately before yours. Say, hey, I'm not going to get a chance to work on the table of authorities until 8 p.m. tonight. I know you were supposed to give me the brief at 6, but I won't get to it at 8, so you need more time. If you can have more time if you need it. Communicating that more time is available is even more important when someone is racing to give you a document first thing in the morning. Now is not the time to be running your team down with all-nighters. Next, manage yourself first. Relay races require everyone to do their part. You can coach others, but you can only control yourself. So manage yourself first. Know your work habits. Be honest with yourself when the day isn't going well. And have a way to restart your day. When you were in an office, perhaps that was running downstairs to get your favorite Starbucks drink. But now that might be saving your shower until 2 o'clock so you can have some free time away from your kids, pretend you're at a spa, and start your day over. Let's go on to the next one. I'm trying to make up time here. So the most important thing is to remember to pass the baton, not the blame. Something will go wrong. It always does. But don't focus on everything that went wrong. Only focus on what it is that you need to actually fix the problem at hand. Put respect first. Communicate what must be fixed. Trust your colleague to fix it and let it go. If you don't want your team to break down and you don't want to be running this course alone, then you pass the baton, not the blame. Next. So let's talk a little bit about technology. I know Nikki covered a ton, but documents are where I live, and almost everything in law relies on document creation. So now that you're working from home, there will be some things that you've relied on others to do that you'll need to do yourself. For many lawyers, these are tasks that you've probably left to your secretaries. Those tasks will now be your tasks. And two of the main ones are proofreading and editing. And there are two great tools to help with that. Full disclosure, I work on both of these tools, but I work on them because I love them. So while practicing law remotely, I used these two tools every day while I was working. Those tools are WordRake and PerfectIt. WordRake is an automated editor. It helps with avoiding legalese and writing clear and concise prose, which also helps you stay within court-mandated page limits. Then there's PerfectIt with American Legal Style. It's an automated proofreader. It helps with checking consistency errors like capitalization, correcting legal-specific typos, and fixing Blue Book citation formatting. Two others that will help you pull your documents together quickly are Best Authority for your table of authorities and Contract Companion. Both are now part of Litera's suite of document lifecycle tools, and they can really help you get further faster. So to wrap my section up, remote work may feel like you're running a race all alone, but the truth is that work is a team sport. It's a relay race. You're all on the same team. You win or lose together. It's easy to lose sight of your team because you're not all on the track at the same time. But when you can't see each other is when it's most important to trust, respect, and communicate. If you can remember to do that, then you can get through anything together.
Ivy, that was fantastic. Thank you so very much for all of that information. And Nikki, you too. I think those two building blocks, the people and the tech, when you get them both right, then working remotely, working virtually can actually be such a boon to the practice. I love it. Susan, I'm going to hand things back to you here to help us finish up and let us know if we have any questions that we can answer.
Okay, thank you, Nora, and thank you, Nikki and Ivy. You had a wonderful presentation with a lot of terrific information today. We want to remind everyone, Atticus has established a coronavirus preparedness hotline. We have a couple of practice advisors on the hotline from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time every day. On the screen, you'll see the dial-in number, the access code. If you can't make the call or the time slot doesn't work, you can email grow@atticusadvantage.com and a practice advisor will get back to you just as soon as they can. So please take advantage of that. The next slide, Nora. Also, Atticus has provided a number of webinars recently. Some are practice specific, others are general. These are all on the Atticus website. So if you've missed one, is there something you maybe saw, would like to review again, you can find them on atticusadvantage.com and then what we do and down to webinars. And the next slide, Nora. Also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, Atticus is posting various things that we see from some of our clients, maybe processes that they've implemented that we want to share with you. So you can go to any one of these sites and take a look and see what the last posting might be. And the upcoming Practice Growth Series webinars in May, we're going to talk about improving practice productivity and profitability. In June 11th, creating the drama-free office, and on July 9th, creating a brand. And these may be flexible depending on how the coronavirus situation comes about. We may have other more specific webinars, so these may be subject to change. Okay. So we are at 1. Nora, thank you for hosting. Ivy and Nikki, thank you so much for attending.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.